As a new real estate agent, it's like very tempting to just fall into this trap of like buying things in a way of like faking progress, right? You're like, well, I acquired this, so I've made progress as a real estate agent. And I've done a whole video on sort of like how not to get trapped in that and sort of some of the ideas on that. But on this video, I'm gonna talk about the first 18 things that you need to buy as an agent. I'm gonna throw in some stuff that you really just don't need to in case that this is the only video that you're watching. I'd like to save you some money, right? And just wasted time, wasted energy thinking about the things that don't matter. So first off, let's start with the things that I really believe that a new agent does not need, that for some reason there's this pull, right? You're like, well, I'm a real boy now, so I should be having these things. First thing, a printer. I don't have a printer. I have a team with a bunch of agents on it. I don't own a printer. I think they're a pain in the butt. I use FedEx anytime I need to print stuff, which to be honest, is not that often. We live in a digital age and you can embrace that digital nature of things. Number two, a fancy camera, a mirrorless camera, some sort of, I don't know, upgraded camera in general. People think like, oh, I'm an agent now and I'm gonna make so much content, but to make content, I'm gonna need a really nice camera, like the people that I watch on YouTube and Instagram and whatever, stuff like that. You don't need it, okay? Especially to start, don't do it. You just might as well just light some money on fire at first. I think there are way better things to be buying. And yeah, save yourself, you know, $3,000 or whatever on stuff like that. Ultimately, I think like you should try to spend less than $500 to get the show on the road, right? To get going in real estate. Other things you don't need, clipboard, right? A stapler, like note-taking stuff. I mean, whatever, if you want to buy a notebook, that's fine. Anything to print, you know, the things that you see realtors have on like House Hunters or whatever. I don't think that you're gonna need that stuff. And I think you just bake in digital workflows into your system and that's all just kind of nonsense. I also don't think that you're gonna need to buy like a tablet just to be like, you know, going through stuff on site. Like you're not a job soup, right? Like you're not gonna be in charge of like a huge crew. That stuff, yeah, you don't need it, okay? A file cabinet, a fax machine, a landline. Those are, first of all, it's dinosaur stuff, but yeah, you don't need that, so don't even think about it. One thing that people really love to do, it really makes them feel like they're making progress and doing the work that matters, an LLC. Not tax advice, not legal advice, but I think you do not need it at first. You don't need a complex tax platform, right? The truth is, until you're making money, you're not getting taxed on the money you're not making, right? But you are paying QuickBooks, like let's say. So there's this idea that like, well, I'm gonna get this tax, you know, well, I'm spending some money, I'm spending $500 up front, so I'm gonna pay $50 a month to QuickBooks so that I can write those things off. Do the math, doesn't make any sense. The point of writing it off to save $50 or whatever a month, until you're making any money and spending real amounts of money, I would say just save yourself the money on things that are designed to save you tax money. So now we're moving into the things that I really think that you probably should be buying. You should be investing some money, some capital into at the very beginning. You're gonna find that it's all related to marketing because the job of helping somebody, helping a client, does not exist until you have a client. I say that all the time on this channel, but it's true. And if you're wondering why you should believe me, my name, first of all, is Jesse Lynch. I run multiple real estate teams around the United States. And in the past 365 days, my team has generated over $41 million in closed volume. And over 95% of that closed volume comes from the ideas, comes from the concepts and the systems that I'm teaching on this channel. I wanna work with people who want to do things differently. So if that's you, settle in for a little bit, get cozy, subscribe to the channel. And if it's not you, I don't know what to tell you, this channel just isn't for you. So first thing that you have to buy if you don't already have one is a smartphone with a phone plan. And I would recommend, if possible, an unlimited phone plan because you're probably going to need it. Not because you're gonna be talking on the phone that much, but because more than likely, you're going to be using a lot of data to make content, right? To do the marketing. And these are the very basic business fundamental items you need. A smartphone, an internet connection, maybe that's a cop-out. Maybe that's not really a thing you need to buy, but if you don't have reliable internet, I would say you need to get it, even if that's only on a phone plan, but you're gonna wanna make it reasonably fast, reasonably reliable. Number 3 is a computer. I think you're going to need some kind of a computer at some point. I think there's a possibility that somebody could just be based on a smartphone until you get a client. It's gonna be maybe a little bit frustrating. I think things are gonna get a little bit clunky, and you might go crazy being on your phone that much. Sometimes it's nice to have a separate screen to look at and to consider. Number 4, you're gonna need a website and a domain. I think IDX doesn't matter. IDX is like where you have home search options on your website. I don't think that really matters. I think that's like an old school thing. I used to have IDX and nobody used it, right? There's Zillow, there's Realtor.com, there's Redfin. Nobody's gonna go to like jesselynch.com just to look at houses because there's all these other options. So, but a website with a domain that you can send people to that is representative of you and of your branding. Personally, I think Wix and Squarespace are very sick and they do a great job. They're affordable. You can work your way up in terms of complexity and things like that, but I would not spend a bunch of money personally on maybe like an overly complicated real estate website with like AI and like all these sort of funneling tools, because I think they're kind of gimmicky, if I'm being honest. I'm losing count, so I'm not gonna keep counting, but the next thing is a non-brokerage email address. I made the mistake very early on for the first year or so of using my brokerage's email address. What you don't realize necessarily is if you ever leave that brokerage, that thing goes, right? That address goes, and how people know to reach out to you, that will disappear. Whereas if you have just your own, along with the website and the domain, usually like another like $10 or $20 a year, can get you an email address, right? So it would be, you know, your name at joeschmo.com rather than your name at such and such brokerage.com, right? So I think that is huge, and it will pay dividends into the future just because you won't have to make that like awkward switch out of it, right? But maybe try to make sure that the branding is where it will actually end up, so you don't have to change that at some point down the road. But maybe you will, and it's not the end of the world. Next item is, this is usually free as far as I know, but a Google listing. You can be on, you know, Google Maps or whatever. It could be at your brokerage's address. Maybe be careful about making it your own address so people don't just show up. Some kind of Google listing that shows more or less that you exist and that somebody could eventually leave reviews. It's not for right now, not for the reviews that you have for clients that don't exist. Although I suppose somebody could do that. You could, you know, a friend could make a review. Really, it's just to like prove your existence, prove that you are out there on the internet and that you're like a real business. Because people, I don't know, they can have a hard time trusting somebody on the internet if they only exist on Instagram, right? How do I know this person isn't gonna scam me somehow? Then last bit of the business basics is a phone number other than your own, unless you don't care. It can just get a little bit tricky to have your own phone number is where you're having everybody reach out to you. If you ever wanna like not be the one taking all the calls, that gets a little sticky. And then also like if you don't wanna get stalked, right? If you're afraid of like weirdos, probably a Google Voice number is not a bad idea. There's also other services like Grasshopper and things like that, but I would say just look into that. Having a phone number other than your own personal phone number that can somehow go to your phone, you're not gonna get weirded out by. That will be a pretty good one. Next little section is based around content. Like I said at the beginning, the job doesn't exist until you have a client who wants you to do the job for them. So in my opinion, content is the thing. It's what we're talking about on this channel. And like I said, it's literally how we've generated $41 million in closed volume in the last year. So first thing, and I'm not counting this, but that same smartphone that you have, right? That smartphone, the cameras on smartphones are nutty. They're getting crazy and they work very well for what most people are trying to accomplish on a content level. Don't go buy a fancy camera until you crush it on your phone. Until you are, you know, really good on the phone, then maybe. But then probably not. If you're like, well, this looks awesome anyway, it's easy to do, keep doing that. Okay, a small tripod for the phone. Something that you can film yourself with, if that's how you're gonna do it. Unless everything's gonna be POV or handheld or something like that, well then that's fine, do that. But probably you're gonna want like a $10, $20, $30 tripod to shoot different things. And I would say early on, you're probably gonna be experimenting with how you want to be shooting things. So I think the small tripod will be useful anyway. I do think it would be wise to invest in a microphone. Microphones can be super, super cheap to start. There are Bluetooth wireless microphones that are like $40, maybe something like that. Very, very reasonable on Amazon that actually can do a pretty dang good job. There are also ways that you can do like a wired, maybe like a 20-foot wired lavalier mic, right? Like this one. That probably sounded crazy, but this isn't wired. This is now wireless and fancier than what you should have right now. But you can get these wired that would plug right into a phone for super, super cheap on the likes of Amazon. It will improve your audio quality quite a bit versus just being a phone, you know, in the room. And audio is important. It improves the watchability of something quite a bit. Speaking of improving the watchability, next item is a $100 light. I put the $100 light on there just because you shouldn't spend much more than that. It should be right around $100 and probably from Amazon, maybe from B&H Photo or something like that. But the reality is you're gonna just start simple and you're gonna get better at using it. There are tons of YouTube videos out there about like how to make lighting look good with really cheap lighting. I've lit things in the past that are using like one of those sort of like can lights from Home Depot that have like the little clamp on it. They're maybe, I don't know, $15 from Home Depot with a normal lens in there. And then you do other things to modify it, like you put up a sheet or a shower curtain or something to make it look softer. And it's honestly kind of insane how effective that can be. So don't spend more than $100 on your first light. Only get one, that's my opinion, and learn how to use the one. Once you start adding in a second and a third, which a lot of them come in kits of 3, once you start adding that, it just complicates it. And you're probably gonna make it look worse than if you just had the one and kind of got good at figuring out how that one works. Next item, and if you're only gonna use your phone, then this one doesn't apply. But something to move video files from your phone to your computer. If you're going to edit on your computer or anything like that, you're going to need a way to get it there. On an iPhone, you can just AirDrop, right? So probably AirDrop is fine. On another computer, maybe you would need like a USB cable or something like that. But probably there's a way to get the content from your phone to the cloud, from the cloud to the computer. It just is more annoying and more friction than it probably needs to be. So if you're using a fancy camera, if you didn't listen to me, right? If you didn't listen to me and when I said don't buy a fancy camera, then you're gonna need something where you can take, you know, like a little memory card and chuck it onto the computer. Next up is a simple editing software. And honestly, this is at the beginning, it's because you're gonna have to do it yourself. And I want you to know how time consuming it is. I want you to know like how complicated it can be, and I want it to become somewhat natural to you, right? And it's possible you're gonna do that in your computer. iMovie exists. You can get a decent edit out of iMovie, depending on what you're trying to do with it. You also can use your phone, can edit quite nicely. There's different things. Adobe Rush is a smartphone editor that is pretty powerful. You know, you can add different layers of audio and things like that. But nonetheless, some sort of simple video editing platform. Unless you're gonna do like single takes or things like that, but I think an editor will be nice, will be important. And partly again, it's just so you know how hard it is when the time comes for something I'll talk about a little bit later. I don't know why that was so vague. That probably didn't have to be that vague, but hey, here we are. Next, you're gonna need extra batteries and or storage for any camera gear that needs it. If you have an iPhone or whatever, some sort of extra battery pack would not be a bad idea. Otherwise, you're gonna have to be really diligent about like plugging it in, or you're just gonna make sure that you have to have battery power. But again, the job for now is just making content. The job for now is getting clients. So you're gonna need to phone that's charged, and you're not gonna wanna run out of battery. You're not gonna wanna run out of storage, because then you're just gonna make excuses. And excuses, honestly, are just a slippery slope that I would like for you to avoid. And again, we're trying to reduce friction. We're trying to reduce like reasons or things that are gonna get in the way of you doing the work that matters. Last little bit of content stuff that you should buy, very technical term. Specifically, if you're gonna do YouTube, for one, there are two platforms. One's called TubeBuddy, one's called vidIQ. They're both really good titling and like SEO platforms. They're very simple to learn, and I would recommend them. I think they're really important to a new creator on those channels. They also help give you ideas and can like help brainstorm a little bit. That said, if you're not gonna do YouTube, you're gonna use TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook, or things like that. Truthfully, those things have like basically managers on them, right? And so I would recommend that you just get good at using those. Meta has like a scheduling platform, more or less, where you can schedule content that's gonna get released on Facebook. And Instagram, it's free, so that's cool. And TikTok also has something similar that I also believe is free. The downside is that they don't like syndicate across each other, right? So you can't post on Meta and it'll make it to TikTok. Obviously, they're competitors. So if you're getting pretty prolific and posting a lot of stuff and this is getting in the way really dramatically, there are content manager things like Pally, P-A-L-L-Y-Y, but we were using that for a long time and I don't know, it started to be a pain in the ass. So I don't know that I can really recommend it anymore. Hootsuite, other things like that. Again, I've never used Hootsuite, but you could look up social media management software and you would find something, and then just see, is it worth the hassle? Is it worth the money? Is it worth the time? Or should you just be using the more like native platforms for Meta and TikTok? Next, we're moving on to open house things that you might want before you even have a client. So open houses are marketing. Okay, don't let anybody tell you otherwise. They are marketing and they do work to get clients. I think actually my third closing ever was from an open house. That said, I didn't do many of them, so I didn't continue to get a lot of them, but it did prove concept to me pretty early on that an open house can get you a client. And so if you're on a team or brokerage where there are like plenty of open houses that are available to you, you don't necessarily need a client or a seller to host the open house. If I, as a team lead, have a listing, one of the agents on my team, or really any agent within my brokerage, if they want to, could technically hold the house open with my permission, with the permission of the sellers, of course. So first thing, this should be, I don't know, a few dollars off Amazon or from a store or whatever, but some sort of like plastic display case, or you could go a little classier and use a picture frame. And I would recommend putting like a QR code to some sort of funnel. So that could be a website, that could be your Instagram, that could be your YouTube channel. It could just be a home search app. That's something we've done in the past. We have an app called Home Spotter and we say, are you still using Zillow? Zillow sucks. Use this, right? Use Home Spotter instead, and you can download it here. And then that does give us access to communicate to them, right? And you can choose how to do that, right? If you want to bug them, or if you just want to say, hey, it was really nice to meet you. I'm here if you ever need me. Here's my phone number, blah, 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 right? That's a sort of a way that you can reach out to them. Or maybe the QR code could just go directly to an email address or something like that. But nonetheless, a super cheap, you know, 8.5 by 11 paper thing with a QR code, or a picture frame with a QR code and maybe like a logo and stuff like that. But really simple. The print shouldn't cost more than $1 from FedEx, that kind of thing. Then a small cleaning kit. For one, to clean up after yourself so that the sellers aren't mad at you, to potentially clean up after like anybody who came through the house who maybe like smudged anything or I don't know, spilt anything or something like that. The worst is being in like an empty house where there's nothing to clean anything and you're like, oh no, like I've dropped water on the floor. How would I possibly clean this up? So small cleaning kit, doesn't have to be that complicated. Then some sort of a tray for Snacks, if you're gonna go that route, right? If you're gonna make cookies, maybe. But if you're just gonna like buy some stuff and kind of put it out on the table, just to be classy, just to, you know, say thanks to people for swinging through. And then usually I'll do like water, maybe I'll do a couple drinks or something like that. And you can either put that in the fridge or you can put it on the table, depending on what is available to you. But just some sort of tray. So I just think it will look a little bit better than if you just like had, you know, small bags of chips on the table. That seems a little wonky to me. Then lastly for the open house is like a Bluetooth. Bluetooth can be a nice touch when it comes to creating a vibe. Also, you could just use your laptop to serve the same exact purpose. Unless your laptop sounds like crap, then you're not really creating a vibe, you're creating a nuisance. If you can buy like a, you know, $40 Bluetooth from Target that sounds like decent and you can play some music from your phone, then great, right? You just a little bit of an extra touch, kind of showing, you know, that you have some sort of taste or, you know, personality or something like that. Then last section that we're moving to is basically just stuff that you should have for your car. And honestly, in my opinion, before you have a client, the only thing that you should have is some sort of charger. A charger for your phone, and honestly, just a charger for any other kind of like wireless battery powered devices that you're going to use to make content. So if your microphone requires a charger of some sort, something to charge that. If it requires batteries, like AAA batteries, I would recommend that you have some of those. Again, the worst is that you drive 20 minutes, 30 minutes to where you're hoping to shoot something and your stuff doesn't work. I've done that more times than I wish I have, but it happens a lot and it can kind of take the wind out of your sails for that day where you're like, man, I'm gonna have to drive another hour just to get back here, or I'm gonna have to go to a Walgreens, which I've also done that more times than I'd like to admit. But nonetheless, device chargers, that is the last thing, the only thing for your car, in my opinion, that you need before you have any client. Because all the job is getting that first client, right? Then don't forget that that job continues once you have your first client, so you're still gonna need all that stuff. But until you have a client, that list, I think, is pretty exhaustive. And now I'm gonna kind of quickly run through, okay, you have a client, you have at least one client that you're actively helping. You didn't just meet with somebody who maybe at some point will buy. There's one person who you are about to show a house to, who you are about to list their house, or something along those lines. I guess those are really the only two options. So first of all, for the content, I believe that at that point, you can consider hiring a remote employee, hiring probably a video editor. I think that should be the first, you know, hire when it comes to somebody who's making content to get their clients. But like I said earlier, I think you should get good at that stuff. I think you should become familiar with that stuff so that you can teach what you're hoping the things will look like to the person that you hire, right? So that you can have any kind of, you know, semblance of what it maybe ought to look like. And then hopefully the person you hire is better than you, and then you can realize, oh, I shouldn't be doing that, right? Hopefully they're way better than you, and it's like, can be a really, I don't know, relieving thing to see that there's somebody out there who can do the thing that you've been doing better than you for, you know, a reasonable price. Then we're gonna talk a little bit about the car section again, which once you have a client, some of this stuff becomes just maybe a little bit more important. It doesn't matter how messy your car is, if it's just you rolling around in it, shooting videos. It doesn't hurt for mental health and whatever, for it to be decent. But a trash can, some sort of vehicle trash can, where if somebody's riding with you, you can say, oh yeah, just chuck it in there. Or just something that lets you pull up to a showing. If your car's super messy and you pull up to the showing, your clients can see in your car. So I would make sure that the inside of your car is decent, at least decent. Otherwise, it might be a little bit embarrassing. Unless that's part of your brand, you're like, hey, I'm messy, then cool. Okay, then there's car wash membership. There's a place in Minnesota called Mr. Car Wash that is great. It's a, you know, I forget what it costs, $30-ish per month, but it's like unlimited. Holiday Gas Stations does it, where it's unlimited exterior car wash, but I don't know, it can just make you feel a little bit better about pulling up to a showing, regardless of what kind of vehicle you have. If that vehicle looks decently clean, right? I don't care what kind of car you have to start. People, the people that you're trying to attract should be understanding of, you know, where you're coming from. An interior car cleaning kit is not a bad idea, especially if you think that there's a chance that you're going to be showing a client around, which doesn't happen as often as a lot of people would think. You know, you watch House Hunters or whatever, and that's kind of like what you see is like, oh, just hop in the back and I'll show you around. We do that a lot for our clients, but a lot of that's because they're from out of town or something like that. But more often than not, there's nobody rolling around in the car with us. But an interior car cleaning kit, in a pinch, if you gotta pick somebody up, or I don't know, I guess if it just looks particularly gross, then it's nice to have something like that. And again, that could probably cost, you know, $20 or something like that. Pretty simple. And maybe I would include this item in that, but it also could be used for the open house cleaning kit. So maybe this is a double up if that is useful, but like an air freshener spray. There's like a Lysol mist that we use, you know, in this office here, in my Airbnb that we have, and I keep one in my car, and it's kind of like a, right? Does that. It's sick, and it works really nicely, and there are good smells, and I would recommend getting something like that. If you're like, my gym bag's in the back, and I'm about to pick somebody up, I don't know, does it stink? I don't know, you've been riding in it, so maybe you don't know, but it would be nice to be able to just zhuzh it up a little bit. Last thing for the car, a mileage tracker app. Again, I think these are the kind of things that people like to spend time acquiring because they think like, oh, I'm gonna save so much money on taxes. But until you have somebody you're helping, I personally think that it's kind of a waste of time. Not financial advice, not tax advice, not legal advice, but how much money can you possibly be saving paying for a mileage tracker app when you are not even making money in the industry yet? I would guess less than the amount of money that you're spending on the mileage tracker app. So I don't know, that's just me. And this final section of the video is something that I'm saving for the end because it's really one of the things that only matters if you have clients. But for some reason, it's like, if you're cosplaying as a realtor, it really feels like the stuff that you should have, right? Because you're like, well, eventually I'm gonna have clients. Eventually I'm gonna need this stuff. And I mean, some of it maybe, but the truth is, until you're doing it, this stuff is kind of like extra and I would say not completely necessary. So first of all, lock boxes. People, I don't know why, but people want to buy like a fancy super lock box, which I think are like $200. They're like the electronic ones. They just like want to have one, right? Because they're like, well, I'm a realtor, I can buy one of these now. It's like, yeah, but why? You know, we actually use, for the time being, we use pretty simple, just normal lock boxes. And yeah, they do a really good job. We put 2 on every single house. So once you have a listing, buying 2 lock boxes with 2 keys, I think is a good move. And a lot of people don't do it for one reason or another, but in the event that a key, you know, goes missing, which does happen, it's nice to have 2. And you can do 2 Supras, or you can do a Supra and hide one somewhere if you want, but yeah, only once you have a listing, in my opinion. Then there are a couple like tools that I think are useful for showings, and you'll see most people aren't bringing this stuff, but I have found them to be pretty helpful. One is a laser measurer. I wanna say they're $40 or something like that, for like a nice one, like a Bosch laser measurer, $40. You can definitely spend less than that if you want, but it can allow you to measure a room really, really easily without like, you know, like putting a tape measure on the floor. Yeah, they're pretty sweet and they're really quick. It can help you measure a garage, for example, right? It's weird how often people are like, how big is this garage? How deep is this garage? Because they have a certain size vehicle and they want to make sure it can fit. So a laser measurer, then a flashlight. Again, this could be your phone for sure for a while. But depending on who you're helping, depending on where you are, depending on what sort of like price point of homes, there's a decent chance you're gonna go into some places that don't have like any lights on, right? Or are really like painfully dark in the basement or something like that. And having a good flashlight is way better than having an iPhone flashlight. And I've done that a lot. So it's a pretty small price for a pretty big upgrade, those 2 things. Next, this is pretty specific. Gum, mints, stuff like that. You know, sometimes days are long and you're like, you know, and you're like, wow, I can't tell. But just in case, a mint, some gum, it's nice to have. Next up, a lint roller. Yeah, again, you might just be like, oh man, I look insane right now. And it's really nice to be able to reach into the glove box and, you know, take some cat hair or dog hair off or whatever. Maybe you brushed up against something and you're just like, wow, I look nuts. Yeah, it can be cool. So I specifically think the fabric style ones, not the, you know, the peel and stick ones or whatever you'd call them. I think those are dumb and kind of waste of money. There are fabric ones. I don't know what to call them. Look up fabric lint roller or reusable lint roller, perhaps. And they're just made of like some sort of fleece and they do a really good job and you can just reuse them over and over again. Big fan of those. Next is shoes. I like to call them showing shoes. They're just like easy to remove shoes. If you're doing a day of 12 showings, especially like in the summer or something like that, and you have like tied up boots on, that's so annoying. It's gonna be not just annoying to you, but annoying to your clients too, in my opinion. So having some sort of shoe that you can slip in and out of, super, super nice for showings especially. But then on the other hand, I think it's actually important to have some sort of boots for muddy conditions or snowy conditions or both. There's something very unappealing to me about a realtor who like can't go walk in the backyard because they don't have boots on, right? Like, I want you as a realtor to be able to lay eyes on the house and assess the exterior of the home the same way, or maybe even better than your buyer would like to. So having some sort of boots that will not make that an issue for you, I think is a good idea. Next up, umbrella and maybe umbrellas. Maybe 3 umbrellas all day. That's a restaurant term, no big deal. 3 umbrellas all day in your car so that you can have one. And let's say you have clients who are, you know, bopping around. They're not getting soaked while you're like, yeah, you know, I got an umbrella. I thought ahead. You know, you're like, I thought ahead for you too. And again, how much is an umbrella? I think those black and white ones from Home Depot are like $5. So chuck them in the trunk, not a bad idea. Lastly, this is something that I must admit, maybe I shouldn't say in a video, I don't really have, but it's some sort of protection. And I'm not condoms. I'm talking pepper spray, taser, any kind of legal thing that you can use as protection. I think could be a good idea if you're particularly nervous about things like that, if you're particularly concerned about meeting clients and, you know, making content with your face on it and then who's gonna be there, who's gonna, right? Not a bad idea. Some people carry a gun, right? It's up to you how you wanna do it, but not a bad idea if you are particularly concerned about those things. I do wish you the best and I hope that nothing like that is needed, but people are weird. So do yourself a favor, do me a favor. Don't waste money. Don't throw money away. Don't let it on fire. If you want to, you just Venmo me some money instead and we'll call it a day. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.